Not every desert is punishment. Some are the stage for a coronation, and maybe that's exactly the kind of place you're in right now. You look around, and everything seems to contradict what God promised you. The doors you thought would open slammed shut. The people you thought would support you disappeared. And the place where you believed you would thrive became a field of rejection, silence, and struggle. But let me tell you something, and I say this with fear and reverence because it's not something I read. It's something God showed me. He causes people to prosper in the very places where no one believes they will succeed. That's what he did with Joseph, and it may be what he's about to do with you. This video isn't just about someone who went from slave to governor. It's about what happens when you carry a purpose that's bigger than the place you're in. It's about remaining faithful when everything around you says, give up. It's about knowing that even when man forgets your name, God still remembers your calling. I'm going to walk you through, step by step, how God turns pits into platforms, pain into purpose, and prison into promotion. But you have to stay until the end because today, you're going to discover how God will make you prosper in the very place they said you would fail. And when it begins to happen, even you won't be able to explain it. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below with your city or country. And if you believe you're ready to receive God's blessings, drop the number 7 in the comments, symbolizing prosperity and blessings. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could also be blessed. Let's map together where the fire of the Spirit is reaching and bringing prosperity. God shows you something, and deep down, you know it's real. You can't explain it, but it feels like heaven whispered inside your spirit, there's something great waiting for you, but when you look around, everything seems like the opposite. People doubt you, your routine feels small, and limitations close in from all sides. That's how it was with Joseph. He dreamed big, but lived in a small place, tending sheep, surrounded by brothers who couldn't see beyond what was in front of them. When God plants something inside you, it's often too big for the place you're in, and that hurts. Because your heart beats for what's coming, but your feet still walk through a ground that seems stuck. You feel like someone with a heavenly vision trapped in an earthly scene. And the hardest part, carrying a purpose you don't fully understand. You know it's real, but you don't know when or how it'll happen. Sometimes it feels like God showed you the promise just so you could wait. But this is how the process begins, with a dream that's bigger than your current reality. Because what God is going to do in your life won't fit where you are right now. And to get there, He'll shake everything, but this is just the beginning. You're about to see what happens when God starts moving the pieces. Because what's growing inside you wasn't born from your will. It was born from His promise. The deepest pain doesn't come from enemies, it comes from those you love. From the ones who should believe in you but choose not to. That's what Joseph went through. His fight wasn't against distant enemies, it was his own brothers who rejected him. Not for something he did wrong, but because of the dream he carried. And maybe you're going through the same thing. Maybe you tried to share what God put inside you, and were met with sarcasm, coldness, and silence. Sometimes those who should protect you are the first to try and extinguish your fire. It hurts because you expect support and find distance. You hope for encouragement and hear only criticism. It's hard to understand why the people you love can't see what God has shown you. But the Spirit made me understand something deep. Not everyone has the sensitivity to recognize what's still being formed inside you. Joseph wasn't a king yet. He only carried the seed of one. And seeds, at first glance, seem small, even insignificant. That's why they rejected him. That's why they didn't believe, but God sees what's hidden. He sees the tree that hasn't grown yet but already lives inside the seed. And what looks like human rejection may actually be divine protection. Because sometimes rejection is the beginning of separation. And God needs to separate you from environments that would kill your growth. What feels like pain may be protection. What feels like loneliness may be preparation, and what seems like abandonment. Is God positioning you for something greater? They stripped your robe, threw you into the pit, sold your freedom, erased your name, and still you were protected. Because there's one thing no one can take from you: the favor of God on your life. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave, taken far from everything he knew, but he was never outside the reach of heaven. That helped me understand something that changed how I see suffering. Being in pain doesn't mean you're far from God. In fact, sometimes it's in that place where He reveals Himself most deeply. Because when everything collapses and yet you're still standing, it's a sign that an invisible hand is holding you. Maybe you're living in a season where it feels like everyone and everything left you. People who promised to stay disappeared, doors you were sure of slammed shut, the path you thought was right broke beneath your feet, but even so, you're still here. That's not by accident, that's a sign that even in the middle of your pit, God never took His eyes off you. Joseph was sold, but God was buying his story. He was taken, but God was directing every step. Sometimes the bottom of the well is just the starting point. Because with God, even your losses become bridges, and the pit they dug for you might just become the ground where He'll cause you to flourish. You were brought into a place you didn't choose. Taken by force, pushed by life, planted in a ground that didn't look fertile. That's how Joseph arrived at Potiphar's house, as a servant, as someone without rights, without future, and yet. The text says, "And the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered." Genesis 39:2. That verse breaks every logic. Because how can someone prosper as a slave? How can there be favor in a place of oppression? But that's how God works. He doesn't ask for ideal conditions, He creates them. Joseph didn't prosper because Egypt was good. He prospered because God was with him. And maybe that's your season. You're in a place you didn't want. A job, a relationship, a moment in life that looks more like captivity than promise. But the presence of God doesn't depend on where you are. It depends on who is with you. You're not just surviving. God is teaching you to grow in the dry land. You're learning to bloom in broken soil, and the fruit that's coming from your life doesn't make sense. That's the sign of His hand. Because when people look at you and say, "How are they still standing?" they'll know you were never standing alone. Even in a house that doesn't belong to you, you can prosper because heaven belongs to you. It's easy to stay firm when people are watching. But who are you when no one sees? That's what Joseph had to face. Day after day, Potiphar's wife tried to pull him into her trap. He was young, far from home, with every excuse to fall. No one would have known, no one would have blamed him. But he knew God was watching, and in the secret, Joseph chose integrity. He chose to run, not from fear, but from reverence. Because the fear of the Lord is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the mark of those who will be trusted with more. Maybe you're being tested in secret right now, and it feels like no one sees your fight. You say no to things you could easily hide. You keep your heart clean when no one is clapping. That's where character is formed. That's where heaven stamps its approval, not with applause, but with purpose. Joseph didn't get a reward right away. He was punished for his integrity. But even in prison, the favor followed him. Why? Because God never forgets those who choose Him in the dark. Before He gives you public honor, He'll look for private obedience. And if you're passing through the fire quietly, know this: what you're doing in silence is shaping the crown you'll wear in public. The worst part wasn't being accused. It was knowing you did the right thing and still ended up in a cell. Joseph chose obedience, and the reward was a prison. Maybe you're there too. You did everything you could to honor God. You resisted temptation. You walked in truth, and still life closed in. People lied. Doors slammed, Opportunities vanished. But here's the mystery. Even in prison, God made Joseph prosper. Genesis 39-23, because the favor of God is not seasonal. It's covenant. It doesn't fade when life gets hard. It surrounds you, covers you, lives with you. And in that prison, Joseph was elevated again. The warden saw something in him. Doors opened in the most unlikely place. And the Spirit of God whispers the same to you today. I will make you prosper where no one believes you can. Even in limitation, He's positioning you. Even behind bars, He's preparing the stage. Prosperity is not always about money. It's about purpose flourishing, even in adversity. And when it happens, those who doubted you will have to testify because it won't make sense. Just like it didn't make sense in Egypt, that prison was never your end. It was the corridor, the hidden hallway where heaven prepares its vessels. And what looks like a delay might be the exact moment God begins to lift you into what He promised. You gave your best, you served with excellence. You interpreted the dream, you helped others, and then you were forgotten. Days turned into months. Silence filled the space where you expected breakthrough. Joseph stayed in prison even after helping the cupbearer, the one who promised to speak for him. Maybe you know what that feels like. You gave, you sowed, you waited, and nothing came back. But what Joseph didn't know was this: God was not being late. He was setting the stage. Because when the time came, not a second earlier, not a moment too soon, Pharaoh had a dream. And suddenly, the name Joseph reached the palace. You see, when man forgets your name, God engraves it in places no human hand can erase. And in that silence, He was aligning the right hearts, the right crisis, the exact moment that would require what only Joseph carried. Maybe your silence is not punishment, it's strategy. Maybe the delay is not denial, it's divine orchestration. Because when God opens the door, it doesn't creak, it swings wide open. And when the right moment comes, you won't have to force your way in. The call will come. Your name will rise, and everything you lived through will make sense. So hold on, because when no one remembers you, heaven is planning something greater. It happens suddenly. One day you're in the shadows. The next, you're standing before kings. That's what happened to Joseph. Years of silence, broken in a moment. He went from prisoner to ruler in a single conversation. And the most powerful part, God didn't just take him out of prison, He positioned him to govern the land where he was once a slave. That's how the favor of God works. It doesn't just rescue, it establishes. It doesn't just lift, it enthrones. What no one expected, heaven had already prepared. And maybe you've been thinking God forgot about you. But what if He was just waiting to do something no one else could take credit for? Joseph stood before Pharaoh with confidence, not because of training, but because of process. His scars became wisdom. His prison became preparation. His pain became a platform. And now, it's your turn to believe. The same God who lifted Joseph will lift you. Even in the place where you were silenced, even among those who rejected you. The voice that once cried out in the dark will now speak in places of influence. Because when God says it's time, not even the highest walls can hold you. So prepare yourself, because what took years in waiting will happen in one day of favor. There's something divine about watching God move in the exact place they said He wouldn't. That's what happened with Joseph. Egypt wasn't just his place of pain, it became his place of promotion. And that's what God is about to do in your life. The place where you were rejected is about to become your testimony. The people who didn't believe in you will witness your rising. The environment that seemed hostile will become the ground of your harvest, because God doesn't just lift you, He glorifies His name through your story. And just like with Joseph, the very place where they tried to bury you will be the platform where He makes you bloom. You see, the blessing wasn't just about Joseph. It was about the people God wanted to bless through him. And the same is true for you. Your prosperity has purpose. Your breakthrough carries assignment, and where you are today is not the end, it's the beginning of something holy. You're not just going to survive where they said you'd fail. You're going to thrive, not by strength, not by chance, but by the hand of the one who never forgot you. So look around. It might still look like Egypt, but soon it will look like promise. And they'll have to say, just like Pharaoh said about Joseph, can we find anyone like this man in whom is the Spirit of God? Genesis 41-38. Now that I've shared all of this with you, I just want to tell you one thing. Don't let the pit define your story. I know what it's like to be in a place that doesn't reflect the promise, to carry something inside you that no one else believes in, to feel forgotten in a place where you were once full of hope. But if there's one thing I've learned from what God showed me through Joseph's story, it's this: the place of your greatest pain can become the place of your greatest promotion. God doesn't need ideal conditions to fulfill His purpose in your life. He just needs your faithfulness, even in the dark, even when no one sees, even when you feel like giving up because He sees you. And just like Joseph, you're not being buried, you're being planted. And what looks like delay is divine preparation. So, if this word touched something inside of you, let me know. Write in the comments what part spoke to your heart or what season you're walking through. Maybe your words will be confirmation for someone else too. And if you know someone who's in a place where they feel overlooked, send this to them. Let them hear what heaven is saying. You're not done. I'm not done. God will make you prosper right there, in the place they said you'd never make it. And when He does, everyone will know that it was His hand over your life.